Now, what does that mean when you look at this kind of the world's largest, youth population entering into adulthood that we have ever seen? Is actually it's a resource. It's the world's largest resource, young people, right? So how do we, as a global society, look at investing in them so that they don't turn as a liability for us? And we know fundamentally, our foundation and the world, and you all believe that's why you're doing this job, is that actually they're assets. They're not liabilities. So as an asset, how do you best leverage them in order to get the best result? So let me just share some global trends that I'm seeing. And I'm going to start with technology. And the reason I start with technology is because technology is one of the things which is driving the pace of development globally so rapidly that our job of equipping young people with the right skills has even become more urgent. We are not just teaching them technical skills anymore. We have to be teaching them, how do you manage change? 30 years from now, we have no idea what kind of jobs will be out there because of the pace of development. So imagine, we cannot teach these technical skills in the full form right now because we don't know what jobs will be out there. The question for us as educators, as society stakeholders, is to figure out how do we teach young people with the relevant life skills so that they're ready to adapt to this massive pace of global change. And that's something for us as educators we need to think about. The technology is also, I've noticed in a lot of countries I work in, the online learning. You guys are all familiar with the whole online learning, the MOOCs and all of the things, That has definitely given more access to education globally. But the jury is still out, the efficacy and the impact of it. I'm not going to talk about that, but there has been more access to education because of online. But what that has done is that it has pushed the teachers to kind of look at curriculum in a different way. And how do young people learn the best? And that's one of the questions that a lot of developing countries are looking at, and even in developed countries, is that this blended learning to social learning. So if you look at blended learning, when you get into the social learning aspect, which is now people are learning by interacting with each other online, right? So that's something for us to think about, the trend, the global trend, how technology is impacting the learning landscape from blended to social learning. And another thing is, you all know youth are at the forefront of this technology. The massive amount of information that they have now is just, nobody would have thought 10 years ago. But what I've seen that has done in classrooms is that it has changed the power dynamic. Now sometimes students have more information, the technical information, than teachers, right? So where does the role of the teachers fit in here? What is the role of educators? So it is becoming more and more about facilitating the learning process than just imparting technical know-how and education, right? So how do we figure out a way to facilitate this learning that you want in your classrooms and help people understand what is the right information and what is the wrong information, right? So it's this, the role of teachers are changing a little bit. Technology is also eliminating a lot of jobs. I just read yesterday in New York Times that the middle management job in the next 10 years would be eliminated because a lot of times, technology is replacing it. What does that mean for us when we equip young people with skills necessary for job skills? So again, all this, what it tells me is that on a global scale, and here including the United States, is that we need to be equipping young people not just technical skills, but more about how to adapt to this change in longer term. Second trend, there's a massive mismatch between what is being taught in classrooms globally to what the real world requires. And I'm talking particularly about the job aspects, okay? So let me just give you one quick statistics, even though I said I don't want to give statistics. In Latin America, we work majorly in Latin America, in 32 countries in Latin America. Youth employment there is 3 times higher than adult unemployment, okay? That's huge. 3 times more than adult unemployment. Yet 80% of the companies there say that they cannot hire people with the right skills. 41% of the companies in the Americas, meaning down Latin America and others, are struggling to find qualified workers, even though you are churning people from school systems and education systems. Same thing in Africa, same thing in Asia, right? So what that means is that we need to stop for a moment, take a pause, and really look internally, saying, how do we equip these young people so that they are job ready, that they're ready for the market, that they have the right skills to look at the 21st century jobs. I would encourage you to go through a report that just came out from Zogby Analytics and Laureate Education. It's a private education company. And they did one of the world's largest recently higher education survey from around the world to understand the innovation in higher education, teaching methodologies and all that. 80% of the students pursued higher education to improve employment prospects and believe the importance of education lies in fostering the right attitude. So think about the attitude component of it in classrooms. That goes back to, again, ability to manage change, the analytical skills, the critical life skills that you need. And the third, which was very interesting for me, it'll be interesting for you guys to think through, is that majority of these are 27,000 students from around the world. Majority of them wanted courses to be developed by employers and be provided apprenticeships. It's a fascinating statistics for me. Young people saying, I want the courses to be developed by employers. But what they're saying, the underlying principle, is that there's a mismatch of what is being taught in the classroom. Can you please teach us more practical components? Okay? So we need to be looking at bringing the real world into the classrooms, whether it's through case studies. It's all about diversity. You're probably, the earlier speaker talked about bringing artifacts, understanding their cultural difference, make it real, make it, relevant. The third trend is it's an increasingly globalized world, and it is not going to stop. We have to come into terms with that. And the national boundaries are blurring. So understanding just your realities is no longer enough. You have to understand somebody else's reality too. Now today products are conceived in the United States, parts are assembled in Taiwan, manufactured in China, bought in France, recycled in India. Yes. Okay? Now think about 7 different supply chains in there. Now think about young people that you're preparing have to work with 7 different supply chains who have different understanding of what things mean, different decision-making processes, different cultures, different histories. And it is going to continue. So it has now become not just a good thing to do, but it's an economic issue now. If you want your kids to succeed in life, they have to understand this. Otherwise, they won't. And problems again. So problems have no boundaries anymore. Young people being at the forefront of technology know what is happening in another country, in other parts of the world. What is happening in the Middle East is going to affect the United States. What is happening in the United States is going to affect Asia. So it's all interconnected. So we need to look at this problems having no boundaries concept and instill in the students, helping them understand the larger perspective. Fourth trend, what I have seen is massive urbanization and rise of middle class around the world. If you just look at China and India, every 2 people out of 6 in this world are either Chinese or Indians. Every 2 out of 6. So if you go outside, meet 6 people, 1 will be from China, 1 will be from India. Okay? Which gives, and in these 2 countries alone, massive urbanization is happening. People from the rural areas are moving. Young people from rural areas are moving in the urban areas. So what that brings is a whole different array of issues in education system, in health systems. And so a lot of countries now, what they're doing is looking at technical and vocational education training as a way to get out and build the communities. But what is fascinating, I was very excited to hear what the earlier speaker talked about, the role of parents. I come from Nepal, and when I was being raised, all my parents said, other people said, it's like, are you going to be a doctor? Are you going to be an engineer? Are you going to be a lawyer? There were only 3 professions. Okay, there was nothing else in this world, just 3 professions. And so when you look at urbanization happening around the world, the parents' mindset need to change too. That you can have somebody working in a store and then go through stages and then go up in the career and go up. That is okay. That's why I love this country a lot. The dignity of labor that the United States, our country, has is amazing. I came from a country where if you actually worked in a restaurant when you are young, you're ashamed. Your family is ashamed. So the culture that is in this country, I want other regions, and it's going to happen because of necessity, the urbanization and the rising middle class. The fifth trend, societies are more open now. What does that mean? Pre-1990, when you look at it, the societies were closed. During Cold War and even before that, people were not able to voice their opinions in most of the parts of the world, right? But post-1990, most of the countries in the world today are very, very open, which means that young people, and that's what majority of my work is concentrated on, is I have found an amazing movement among young people to voice their opinion for accountability. And that kind of mindset needs to be fostered in school systems from the get-go, from the elementary schools. And I see a lot of debates happening in high schools here in the United States, a lot of kind of engaging in the communities, the service learning. I want that to be more and more in other parts of the world too, because that really builds a case for them to own their communities, to be accountable for the rest of their life. The sixth trend is changing equation in power. If you look at 1500s, I don't know, have you read the book called World is Flat? I would encourage you to read it. It's a fascinating book by Thomas Friedman, which talks about the changing in our human civilization. In 1500s to 1900s, the power lied in nation states, meaning the countries had the biggest power. The 1900s, 2000, it was the corporations. What he says is now, this century is all about individuals. The wealth, the power is now in individuals, not even in entities anymore, okay? What that does is creates a whole different problem, which is ethics. If you are relying on individuals to have power and run systems in any country, then you need to be looking at ethical decision making every single moment, right? So how does it get back to the young people? Is this in your classrooms, the ethical decision making gotta be a component about how you equip the young people in your classrooms, because that's gonna really shape the century in good or bad. When power is concentrated in individuals, and if you are raising people, unethical people, you meaning not just you, like the society, then we have a very bad match. So think about that component, and then you cannot teach ethics. You gotta let them practice ethics. So the experiential learning opportunities in your classrooms are gonna be an amazing tactic, a strategy for you to use as you think about this. So those are just macro level global patterns that I'm seeing. So what does that mean for us? So a few things just to capture. I'm not going to talk a lot, okay? So I want to have a conversation with you guys. Education got to be more relevant. The disconnect between youth skills and labor market demand is huge. We got to somehow bring this back, whether it's engaging employers in designing curriculums or having case studies, real practical case studies in classroom. That's important. So how are you going to bring that real world into your classrooms? Another one I mentioned, 1.1 billion people on the verge of getting into the job market. There is no way formal economy can sustain that around the world. No way. Even the world's largest industry for employment, hospitality sector, can only get 70 million jobs in the next 10 years. Okay, so you're talking about 1.1 billion. So entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial mindset, self-employment is going to be key of how do you make sure that these young people are engaged productively. Improvements to secondary and vocational educational outcomes so that the transition from school to work is smooth. And that also requires, again, what I talked about, the parental mind shift change, that working is important no matter what you do shouldn't be important. It's like dignity of labor concept. I don't see a lot in many other countries that I have worked in. Still, on a global scale, girls and women are being left behind. in a big, big way. So then it got to be a cultural shift around engaging, and even I'm sure even in your classroom, I have realized, it's fascinating. I have a staff comprised of both genders, and when they come to me in their evaluations, the way they handle negotiation is so different. How men do versus women do. And as educators, I think it's upon us to kind of foster that in girls and women. And now being a father of two girls, I continuously look at positioning them as strong, and that they and so it's got to be in the mindset among educators, no matter where you are from. Technology knowledge is a must. That is, please do understand that. Without that, they're not going to be successful. Knowledge about technology, okay? Life skills for youth is important, very, very important. Again, how do you manage change? Language skills, another major component. So, those are just some elements, and I want to just end by saying this. You can create young people to be best technicians and vocational, great in what they do and all that, but if you have not created empathetic people, we have failed in our job. Because at the end of the day, societies are built by people who have values, ethics, compassion, and empathy, right? Even if you have amazing people who have done great work in their professions, but if they are not ethical decision makers, we have seen what has happened around the world. If you have created great political leaders who becomes a prime minister or president, but if they're unethical and are not compassionate, the countries go down, and we have seen this time and again. So in essence, at the end of the day, it's all about that character that we're building, right? So the question for us is that what are some of those strategies? So I was very happy to hear earlier that the speaker who spoke about the exposure. Make the students, exposed to differences, whether in your classrooms, whether different strategies she talked about. Understanding the differences. Because, conflicts, if we are to say that conflicts, we should get rid of conflicts, that's impossible. Human nature is built in a way that conflicts will always be there. We have to come in terms with that. I have seen that multiple times. I have ran workshops between Israelis and Palestinians. Conflict is there. Young people. But when we have brought them together in the room and helped them understand the differences and appreciated the difference, but also understand the similarities as human beings, the whole dynamic changes. So how do we as educators in your classrooms help them understand the similarities as human beings? Because at the end of the day, we are all same. I'm brown, but it's the same. Its externalities may be different. So I think that's important for us to continue to put that in. Yes, you can build your technical skills, but the essence there is that if you're building them as human beings with good souls or not. I would also encourage you to, as we think, but not just you, I've mentioned this wherever I've talked about this, I don't like the word tolerance. A lot of times people say, build tolerance. I would push you to say build acceptance. Those are two very different terminologies. It's not just about tolerance, it's about building acceptance. And so the last, what I'm going to say is, the lady earlier talked about the quotes. I love this quote. Celebrate what is right in the world so that you get the energy to fix what is wrong in the world. Right? It's an amazing, amazing quote, and there's a documentary from National Geographic, which I would really strongly urge you to use in your classrooms. It's fabulous. We do it in multiple workshops we do around the world. Is this notion that for the young people, focusing on what they're doing right will give them the energy to fix that, whatever they're doing wrong, right? So if we just harp on wrong thing, and even in this room, you got to celebrate all the right things that is happening in your classrooms. Right? So that will give you the energy, because your work is one of the hardest, I would say, in the world. I'm not joking. And so focus on the things that are working and build on that so that you get energy. So for me, the question that I would leave with for you to ponder is that what is education actually for? Okay? For me, it is, you guys are bridging the hope gap. That's what you're doing. Education is all about building hope. So hope in whatever way you say, and we have seen a lot of people talk about diversity, we talk about a lot of people out there on a global scale do not have hopes, and even here in a lot of our classrooms. So your job is to bridge that hope gap.